Kina si tafadhali, hebu fikiria hiyo kitu nataka kuniambia kabla nishike hii simu. Kama unataka kunipomoa, toa hiyo simu kwa masikio. Unaona hiyo kitu ya red? Finya hiyo kitu ya red.
Kupata ulimi na mafikira, bonyeza *811 *815 *811 *815
Abantu ba Minto Buyamore, stesheni inayoipenda ya Minto FM inakualika ujumuike nasi katika bonge la roadshow itakayofanyika kwenye kaunti ya Nyamira siku ya Alhamisi tarehe 16 Juni. Msafara wa Minto FM utapitia Kijauri, Nyansiongo, Manga, Keroka, Gesima, Mosoveti, Konate, Dangenyo, Nyamira na Miruka. Nayo tarehe 17 tutatembelea maeneo ya Ikonge, Ekerenyu, Magwangwa, Magombo, Tombe, Kemera, Omogonchoro, Getare, Jogo na kumalizia mjini Kisii. Kutakuwa na vichekesho, burudani na zawadi kemkem za kushindaniwa. Pia utakutana na kikosi kizima cha watangazaji unaowaenzi.
Minto FM Enyakaruga Yomogusi.
There's still time. Take this girl back to Green Hill before our father returns.
When father returns, I'll talk to him and break off the engagement.
And you're now in love with another woman from Green Hill? Throw her down the void hole.
Yes.
Mercy, my king, my king.
You just stop right now.
That's not ordinary lightning. It's lightning that's intended to be used in trials. To not withstand it would mean death.
Seems being the prince isn't a blessing, but a misfortune.
You think you are so smart, Odette? Well, you are not going to get away with this.
Actually, I just came here to leave my things.
Oh, well, that's not a problem. I'll cancel the reservation so I can go with you.
No, I can't take you with me. I'm sorry.
Mr. and Mrs. Paulina Morat and Camilo Fonseca. He's officially their child and his name is now Mauricio Fonseca Morat.
He's mine, and I've gone through a lot just for him. So you are not going to spoil any of my plans. So I want you to stay away from him. Deceive me! You fooled me! Hey, it was because he wanted to be with my brother!
Thank you. A very good morning to you. Thank you for making time to watch KBC Channel 1. You are just in time for Biz Check this morning. And my name is Betty Kiptum. And Lensa Odingo is my colleague on the sign language interpretation. Now, over the next 2 hours, we shall be having quite some candid discussions. One conversation is on genetically modified foods that were banned in Kenya at some point, and now it's opening up. We shall be talking about this with Professor Richard Owuor. He's a research director at Kenyatta University. He's with me already in studio. In the second hour, we shall be talking about business process outsourcing, just what is happening in the IT industry and how are businesses outsourcing their IT processes. That will be having that conversation with Vinay Subaramaya. He's the BPO director at Technobrain. But first, our conversation on matters GMO with Professor Richard Owuor from Kenyatta University. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Betty.
Kindly give us an overview of how the GMO industry is doing in Kenya.
Thank you so much. I think it's doing pretty well now. We are at a point where we have already approvals to undergo or undertake commercial cultivation of GMO cotton. We also at a point where the country is only waiting for a cabinet approval so that the BT maize, which is also GMO maize, to again move to the next crucial stage of commercialization. We're also at a good place because we have cassava that has already been approved to undergo open cultivation, and this is cassava that is tolerant to or resistant to what we are calling cassava brown stick disease. And this therefore means that those are the top 3 runners of GM crops that are actually out here at a good level. So soon we will be having BT cotton out there because it has gone through all the requirements.
Right. Before we even get into the now and the future, let's take it back a little bit.
Yes.
That ban, I mean, since November 2012, you could not import or grow genetically modified foods or any other material in Kenya. What necessitated this ban, and what did it take for it to be lifted?
Well, you've asked 2 questions really in one. What necessitated the ban was some naive paper, and allow me to use the word naive, by a French scholar called Seralini. And that paper was published in 2012, and it was claiming that some rats that were exposed to a particular GMO maize developed cancer. And it was published. Then it emerged later that indeed it never went through the right process. The data was flawed. One was the choice of the rats they used, and I'm using rats here just for, that's not what we call it in the labs, but for the purpose of breaking it down.
Okay.
Allow me just to call it rats,
Right.
but we should call them mice and many others. But for simplistic purposes, allow me just to call them rats or mice, but they are different. But the whole idea here is that the mice that were used to be fed by those GM maize, as claimed, were already predisposed to tumor. What it means is that when you want to do, say, research in cancer, you use a particular sort of model animal that you have already predisposed to tumors, so that when you are testing your new drug on it, you see what it does to it. So they are already, actually, this particular mice, even if they were fed on water, they will still develop tumor. That is what it means. So feeding it with GM maize and then seeing some tumor and then attributing it to the GM maize was flawed. And many others in terms of even the size of the tumor, because there are ways on which with which you should use to handle animals in the lab. There are a lot more of regulations around this. But if you look at the sizes of even the tumor that were actually published, they were bigger than the normal sizes that are recommended. So, and many other, the sizing. So there are lots of problems that were with that paper. And later on, the paper was retracted. And in science, if your paper is retracted from the journal that actually published it, it's an embarrassment to scholarship and science. That happened still. Later on, actually, it was so bad that even another journal published it again for purposes of keeping it, archiving it, so that people should know how not to do bad research.
Okay.
This paper, when it got here in 2012, it led to pronunciation of a ban. And unfortunately, it wasn't. It was just an executive order. It wasn't really a decision as such. But we picked it. We are still at it. Up to now, it has not been lifted. What has happened is that the government in the bid to facilitate and enhance the Big Four agenda implementation, particularly on manufacturing. Textile is one of the big areas for manufacturing, and therefore the raw material for the textile industry is actually cotton. And that was very critical that it was accelerated, and now it has been approved. The ban is still there, which we want lifted, and probably given time we will discuss on what it's doing now to the country with its existence.
Right.
Yeah.
So the cotton was allowed, and then now we have cassava that is already moving into, you said field production?
Yeah, well, open cultivation, and we also have BT maize, yeah, which has gone through all the open cultivation and is only waiting for a bit of cabinet decision on it, and it will advance to the last stage before it then gets commercialized.
What is the benefit of having GMO technology? Say, even if when the ban is lifted, we hope that it's lifted one day. When it is lifted, what will it be? What will be the benefit to the Kenyan economy? Let's start there.
It's interesting right now. You see, the ban is in importation, but now, and this is the tricky bit, Betty, if the ban is on importation, and now we have already approved commercialization of those ones that are already here, then in essence, really, we don't have the ban. But I don't want to go into that, because we are happy with the little that so far we've got, that we can have it at least commercialized in the country. The benefits are huge, and sometimes I'm surprised, because I make GMO myself. I'm a molecular biologist, so I cut, clone, do this genome, genetic manipulations on other crops, including maize for drought tolerance, which probably we'll talk about also later. And therefore, it's a technology that I have engaged with for several years. If just to even take you back to how have we then used this very, very technology in medical field. You see, any person who you can see out there who is diabetic is actually enjoying GMO insulin. There is no any non-GMO insulin world over as it is. And why was this big? It was big because before, Betty, if you're diabetic, what would we do? We would try to purify some insulin from somebody and see whether we can inject you with it. Okay. And then that became very impossible. Then we went to pigs, and therefore we would purify a bit of insulin from pigs. But imagine what that would do to a Muslim. He would rather die with that your insulin from the pig. He wouldn't touch it, right? Then we looked back and said, look, why are we struggling? If you are not diabetic, it means your insulin is right. And therefore there is a gene in your body that is actually facilitating the production of this correct insulin that you have. Then instead of wasting time, we just go into your genome, just ask you to open your mouth. We just take a small little swab. That's enough to extract the DNA. Then from that we will identify that particular section of the gene that produces insulin. That is what we clone and then express it in bacteria, E. coli by the way. Then tag something into that particular expression cassette in our language so that it is expressed outside the cell. Then as the bacteria is just growing in the broth, in the liquid media, it's also excreting insulin. Then you just purify, you bulk that, and you have your insulin. That is a recombinant DNA technology. Doctors are prescribing insulin. Nobody is complaining. I want them to be on street. Nobody's saying this. So we keep wondering, how come if the same technology, we are using it for crop improvement so that we become food secure, it's a big deal. So is it therefore trendy for people to die out of hunger but not out of disease? Because that's exactly what I'm beginning to feel. I'm even thinking that it's better really to be food secure so that we are able not to be exposed to a lot more diseases. That's just one example. We have the recent vaccine for COVID. That is RNA technology, where you have identified the core proteins within the virus, and that is what you're using to trigger the body to produce antibodies. That is what we saw, and everybody took it. We were never on street. So, and it's the same thing. So when we bring it now to food security, because the whole idea is this, Betty, we have maize, for example, that you take it out there, it will be chewed up by all these insects. And we are saying these insects are not our relatives. They are good in terms of the food web and food chain and all that for the environment and diversity. But when you are going to die because your maize has been eaten by fall armyworm, all of it cleared, what do you do then? You come and say, there must be something in this world that kills fall armyworm. So what we do is that thing is what we identify. If it is produced by anything living, and many of them are, we identify the gene that produces that thing that kills fall armyworm. We bring it into maize and express it onto the leaves and everywhere else. We can actually even choose not to express it on the kernels that we eat, because we understand it's all sequenced. So when you make such an insect tolerant maize, for example, how bad can that get? And you see, when sometimes people argue, they seem as if these things are coming from the West. This lab I'm talking about that I've been heading, and I'm the Director of Research Support at KU, really is here at Kenyatta University since 2005. That is 17 years we've been doing this cloning and cutting and putting this thing here in this country by Kenyans, by many of us. So at this point in time, I'm not surprised as an individual. And as a, if you ask me, we have a lot more benefit. Because look at the economic gain that comes from it, and probably given more time we will talk about it. South Africa adopted GMO in 1998. 1998 to date, if our mathematics could be correct, we are almost talking about 24 years of the planting, cultivation, commercialization of these GM crops. It was cotton, it is soybean, it is BT maize. They're already existing there. I was at the University of Kiptum for my PhD. Really, we enjoyed all these things, and we are here still, and that has taken years, over 10, 15 years, So the whole idea is, and let me surprise you, Betty, when you look at the economics from 1998 to 2018, that was 10 years, right? South Africa benefited $2 billion USD and 237 million USD in the year 2018 alone. Look at that kind of economic benefit that can come from this. And apart from that, other countries are now on it, and probably we'll discuss about that a little further.
So speaking of other countries,
yes.
The US, they are thinking of renewing their AGOA agreement, that gives preferential trade to countries such as Kenya.
Yeah.
And they were complaining just in April that this ban on GMO imports for Kenya, that is affecting that kind of agreement or even the trade that we have. So why is the government taking so long to lift this ban? If, as you say, the paper was flawed, that necessitated the ban in the first place. The paper was flawed, and here is trade even being impacted with other countries. Why is the government taking so long?
Several reasons come into mind when you ask such a question. Because what's funny is that while we were banning in 2012, Sudan approved. And for the last 10 years, this is 2022, that's 10 years of ban. And the reason was that about cancer. Now the question here is, and just you ask yourself basic questions, Betty. If for the last 10 years there has been a ban on importation and consumption of GMO in this country, for the last 10 years, then if the reason was cancer, have you heard of cases of cancer in this country for the last 10 years? Because if it was the source of cancer, then for the last 10 years, when we have total ban, we shouldn't be talking about cancer. So the reason for which it was banned actually is flawed. Cancer has been here even before. There are kids who are born, who have not even eaten any GM, and they are cancerous. And because I have interest in cancer research, which I'm currently undertaking on other reasons that we could be having cancer, including exposure to ionizing radiation in the environment, we are trivializing the fight against against cancer. But that could be a discussion for another day. Part of the reason why I think the government had not actually lifted the ban, which right now I would say they have 50% or 70% lifted because they have commercialized, approved the commercialization of BT cotton anyway. Only that the importation bit is where there's still a small little challenge, and we're still hoping they will lift it absolutely soon. Could be one, would be the fact that yes, there was panic, and probably there was no also a lot of consultation, because I wish we were consulted, because we would have given them the real reasons why that ban is really affecting this country. And also probably sometimes as a government, if these things happen, you have heard of situations even in this country where if something happens, for example, there have been even road accidents, you see a ban on probably night travels and all that, but after some time they lift. And we say if that paper was out and there was panic as a government, probably the right thing to do is first of all stop it quickly and just think through it. But we are saying if that was a good thing, it's fine. But 10 years of restructuring is where we have a problem. Why has it taken you 10 years, really? It was good for the government to say, hey, we are seeing this paper, scientists, what are you guys saying? Because whoever banned it was not a scientist, really. We were here, I wasn't consulted. And I work for Kenyatta University, it's a public university, I'm paying salary by the government. You would imagine that our national academies would have been consulted, and even key stakeholders, I wasn't. And that was the only lab in this, in East and Central Africa, in the universities that can do cloning. Now we only have 2 in the universities. One is here, and then another one is Masinde Muliro that was approved just recently. Okay, for a long time, this has been happening here at Kenyatta University. My thinking is the government panicked. And probably if you hear that this thing is causing cancer, and everybody's scared of this cancer, which means probably we give more funding to cancer and leave GMO alone, because it's not what they think it is. But also to say something else is that our regulatory agencies also probably needed to come out very strongly. That time they were a bit slow, but they realized later on that this thing is not really correct, and also firmed up, because if a government banned importation and consumption of GMO, Betty, and never banned National Biosafety Authority, which is the organization that is mandated to regulate GMO. So what exactly? Because why were we still having National Biosafety Authority to regulate GMO when you have banned it? When you ban something, you don't regulate. And that is why we don't have cocaine regulatory authority, because it is banned. It is banned, yes. Yeah, you get. So that was just double standard, and I think it was all panic. It is time that we need to absolutely lift this ban, because the benefits are huge.
The benefits are huge.
They are.
Well, of course, we hope that happens. We are having a conversation on matters GMO in Kenya, and we are talking with Professor Richard Oduor. He's a research director at Kenyatta University. This conversation continues in a bit. We just want to take you to the Africa Public Service Day celebrations, and the Public Service Principal Secretary Mary Kimonye is speaking. Let's listen in to that conversation.
Take stock of challenges that they have experienced and together come up with solutions that can be replicated to improve the public service. So we will be at the Kenyatta International Conference Center, and we have structured our celebration in 4 ways. 1, we will kickstart the celebration with management of the environment in line to the directive issued by His Excellency the President. We'll be in Gong Forest, where we will plant trees on Monday. Starting on Tuesday, we'll have a symposium and an exhibition. The symposium will be paper presentations by scholars and thought leaders in the line with the theme. And the theme of our celebrations in Kenya here is transforming the public service, 10 years journey and beyond. Why we have picked that theme is because the public service this year comes at a unique time. It coincides with the end of term of His Excellency the President, and therefore we'll be looking at achievements in the transformation of the public service for the last 10 years, and then rethinking the public service of the future going forward. So the topics we have chosen topics that resonate with the programs that the government has had. We have a topic on resilience in nutrition and health. We'll have topics on mental health. We'll have topics on digitization. And we'll have topics on transformation of the human resource in the public service. Let me touch on human resource in the public service. To be able to transform the human resource, you need the right policies in place. And therefore, we have started looking at our policies. And one of the policies we have developed to help in that area, and also to answer a very important question which was asked here about how we treat members of the public, is a policy on dignity at work. We are calling it the Dignity at Work policy. The Dignity at Work policy speaks to the environment of receiving and giving services, where we are saying the Kenyan citizens have a right to receive services in a friendly, welcoming, and dignified environment. And therefore, the public servant has the responsibility to make the service environment a dignified ecosystem. And every employee, we are saying, has a right also to experience their full potential in an environment that is motivating and an environment that allows them to perform, and perform also to the highest standards, but also in a dignified manner. So that is the Dignity at Work policy. Again, it speaks to the openness of government, and that the government has a responsibility, civic duty, to open itself for scrutiny by members of the public. So we are telling every single servant, public servant, that you have the moral and civic responsibility to make this country better. And the only way you can make it better is if you deliver services to the public with honor and with dignity. And also we are saying that for you as a public servant, within this policy, it is your responsibility to cultivate broad, accepted, what I would call trust with government. Give services in a manner that the public develop trust in their government. And therefore, that policy will speak to the way you use language, your attitude towards public servants, your attitude towards other people, your attitude towards the public. So that is the Dignity at Work policy.
That is the Principal Secretary in charge of the Public Service, Mary Kimonyo. They are speaking on the Africa Public Service Day. She has outlined quite a number of issues that those celebrations will deal with, including the mental health of public servants, as well as the nutritional health of public servants, as well as also HR issues, human resourcing issues. And she has urged public servants to ensure that they give services to people that cultivate trust among the citizens in the government. Well, we shall be following up the details of that particular celebration and bringing them to you in our subsequent bulletins. But here in studio, we get back to our conversation on matters, GMOs, and we are talking with Professor Richard Odwor, a research director at Kenyatta University. Thank you for staying with us, Professor.
Thank you so much.
Before we even just get into the details of this GMO, could you break down what GMO exactly is for Kenyans to actually understand what it entails?
Thank you, Betty, for that question again. You see, when you talk about genetically modified organism, you are actually saying that you have this organism that has received DNA from another organism that naturally it couldn't have, that cannot allow natural mating. And that's the basic way of explaining it. For instance, Betty, when you are eating githeri, largely it has beans and maize, and probably Irish, potato. But let's stick with just beans and maize. So when you are crushing those two in your mouth, you are mixing DNA. you are mixing DNA. And why are you having beans in there? Because you want the proteins that beans have. And maize will give you the carbohydrates that you require. You probably can put a bit of salt in it to give you a bit of minerals, and put some oil in it to give you a bit of fats. All that makes a nutritious food. But we keep mixing these things because our bodies require these biomolecules. Now, if it happens that now there is fall armyworm that is eating all the beans, and they are not able to now grow naturally. You see, but you still require the proteins that are in the beans. So what do I do as a genetic engineer? I look at the genome of beans. We don't eat beans because we like the color. It's because we want the proteins that are in there, right? And for that reason, luckily, we are able to sequence the genome of most of these crops. It's all sequenced. Like in your body, you have 3.2 billion nucleotides. And it's all sequenced human beings. So we know what is where, what's responsible for your hair, what's responsible for your skin color, all these things, we already have them. Now, if I have already sequenced beans, for instance, now I have my maize, which is not affected by the natural calamities, but the beans are affected. What I do is that I sequence the entire genome of beans and say, what are the set of genes that are responsible to produce for the production of proteins? And they are there, and we know them. You cut that nicely and clone it into the genome of maize, because maize is also sequenced. You place it in the genome somewhere. When you do that, and even target it so that that protein is on the kernels, because you don't want it on the roots, because we don't eat the roots. We don't want it on the leaves. It could be on the leaves because for our cows and everything else, it could still be fine. We can actually choose to be fair to everyone, at cows and ourselves, and put it in all the system so that the roots can get a bit of it, and so that the nematodes that are down there can also enjoy. But the idea is, now we will have maize that has both the proteins and the carbohydrates that it was originally actually having. If you have such maize, will it really be bad? Because you naturally actually eat beans, and there's nothing different that we have done. So when you talk about it, at that point, that maize will be called genetically modified maize, because naturally you cannot cross beans and maize. It can't happen. And that is where now the gene, the advantage of this technology, that we have now gone beyond the barriers of the species, that human beings were supposed only to compare notes with fellow human beings to get a baby. But if you feel that your interest is to have probably soft hair that is in the, in the horses, then you cannot compare notes. It won't give you any offspring. But if the hair is what you want, we just go to the horses and say, this particular person wants this. And there must be a reason why we do this. We just don't go there to pick these proteins because of the fun of it. There must be genuine reason. We will have tried all the ways to still get our beans to grow without moving the genes. But also something else that is very important, because somebody out there would look at it and say, wow, that is interesting, but what would happen? What are the fears?
Yes,
Let
is
me
it
tell
safe?
You.
That's
Yes,
what they're asking
the safety.
themselves.
So was it unsafe when you are eating it together? It's the same proteins.
Well, it's produced naturally, so we trust Mother Nature.
It's also natural because it's the maize that has also produced it. It's not being synthesized in the lab. It's still gone back to a plant. Maize is a plant and whatever. So the whole idea is, and your question is to ask, now how do you screen that it's the correct thing? When we move this gene to the genome of maize, we also sequence and get to know where exactly is this gene, because it can go and insert itself in the place which give the maize probably the green color. So you find maize becomes black. It is nutritious but now black. That has a lot of effects, and that is why it takes almost 15 years to get a genetically modified crop to be commercialized. And even after that, you can't do that thing in just ordinary lab. That lab at Kenyatta University, and also in Il Rebecca, and also now in the Masinde Muliro, that lab, and Kalro, there are only 4 now in the country. Those labs are tightly regulated by National Biosafety Authority. And the people who actually handle this must be also qualified. And even us, we are also Kenyans. We also want to live in this country. We are not here to kill the entire humanity, So we are also tightly regulated. And globally, we also have conventions and treaties that you must work within to make sure that they are safe. They are very safe. get it from me. Thank you, Betty.
They are very safe, you see. I would like to ask about the ethical boundaries when it comes to such technology. Are there any, and how do you ensure that, let's say, people with evil motives do not, take advantage of this?
Because one, there is peer review. A process that happens. That's why you publish. We want to get to know what this person is also publishing. We can know whether they have ulterior motive, number one. Number two, there is also the trust in scientists. There are also registration to professional bodies. There, WHO is watching. National Biosecurity Authority is watching. There in EU, there's EFSA are watching. In the US, the FDA is also there watching. And we are supposed to be giving step-by-step accountability of everything that we do in the lab. That is why they come routinely to check what we are doing in the lab. But also, just to alleviate your fear, Betty, is that, the fact that a knife has been used to stab another person cannot make you ban the utility of a knife in the kitchen.
That is true.
What we only do is we put laws that when you use a knife, instead of chopping your skuma wiki and you use it to chop somebody else, we arrest you and you go to jail. So even here, if you contravene these laws that are governing our operations in the lab, you are also liable for imprisonment. So we also have those regulations. So my thinking here would be, let's not be overly paranoid, thinking, hi, this is, not regulated. It is very regulated. And we haven't seen any. Get me the examples of any Kenyan scientist who has been this naughty. So sometimes it's good to be a little cautious, but sometimes a lot of caution really would also make us not really get to the intended objective of technology. And it is so sad, because as we are still debating, it's interesting. When you go to US, almost soybean and almost 70% of most of the foods are already GM. I would want to see people actually refusing to go to the US because of the fear of GM. They don't even, or carry. I would want to see a lot of luggage with food, that enough for them to eat when they're in the US until they come back. Because it's allowed. When they go to South Africa, I want to see this. And in this country, actually in Africa, now, we are at a point where we have 11 countries really actively engaging in this technology. And 7 of those countries actually have commercialized. We have South Africa, we have Kenya now, we have Ethiopia, we have Sudan, that is, we have Malawi down there, Eswatini, and Nigeria on the other end. All this, and Nigeria accounts for a quarter of the population of Africa. So if 1 in 4 persons you see is supposed to be a Nigerian, because if there are almost 200 and we are talking about 800 million to a billion people in Africa, that's a quarter of the population. If they have gone this direction, in 2019 they actually approved cowpea. They are enjoying it, and they were the first country in the world actually to export genetically modified cowpea. They are reaping billions. Here we are still cautious. Sudan, when we were banning in 2012, because they have done it for the last 10 years, their BT cotton is up. Their industries of textile industry has been revitalized heavily. And we are still here discussing, 10 years later with the ban, and cancer is still here. That was the reason why there was a ban. And for the 10 years that we have not even eaten anything cancerous, have we had babies with cancer? Have we had cases of cancer in the country? So the panic was right then, but it cannot be for 10 years. It is just too much of waiting.
Kenya's agriculture sector is affected by very many challenges right now, starting from the diseases and pests to climate change issues that are impacting Kenya and the region really quite hard. Do you think that the GMO technology is the way to go in terms of sorting out these issues?
It will help them a great deal. One, look at the data. In Eswatini, they used to actually spray 8 times per season. Now it has been reduced to 3. What does that do? It saves the environment, because when you're spraying, you're throwing in chemicals in the environment, and also saves them money. If you look at in Sudan, 150,000 farmers are now active growers of GM crops. If you look at the almost the 2.1 million hectares of land that is growing GMO crops in South Africa, and in 2018 alone, they reaped 237 million USD just down here, and it's an African country. You sometimes wonder what really we are doing. Now, this is what it does. In the lab at Kenyatta University, where I was the head for several years before becoming the director of research, we do so many crops that we are trying to improve against environmental constraints. For instance, I was working on drought-tolerant maize. And drought-tolerant maize, drought is big, especially in the face of climate change. And what is funny, Betty, is that in science, things are possible. We don't synthesize these things in the lab. We pick them from already existing germplasm. I can give you an example. If you go to Mandera or Northeastern, you will find it's drought, it's desert sort of, right? But when you look keenly, you can find sisal growing, isn't it? Why is sisal growing and maize cannot grow? Yet sisal is also a plant. So what we do, and this I'm just giving an example, I go into the genome of the sisal, identify, sometimes you'll realize it's the root that is longer, so it gets some water down there, or the leaves of sisal, you'll find it has very shiny cuticle, it reflects back the heat, and therefore very little is absorbed. Sometimes it's the succulence that you see on the leaves. So what do? I go pick those 3 genes, one for root elongation, one for cuticle, so that even the leaves of maize, when it is heat, it reflects back the heat so that little is affected. Then I transfer them into maize. How bad can that get? Root elongation. So that is just an example. But if the unfortunate bit, and this is what I keep challenging the public, is that we are also very rigid in what we eat. We are very rigid, and if you are able to start enjoying sisal soup, we wouldn't bother. Yeah, you see how you're looking. Yeah, sisal soup. We wouldn't bother because it's existing in the drought environment. That's what my analogies say. So if we can also keep moving, because let me tell you the trick or the reality is that the world, nature always provides something. Even if there is drought, there are sisal, cactus, and all of they are growing. So just change and start eating them. Then you leave maize until the time when maize can grow. But we are also very rigid. So that means that we are now given a challenge as scientists. What do you do to the maize that the farmers now don't want? They want to uproot them. We come with solutions. So drought is one of it. Cassava, for instance, the cassava, there are those cassava, you have heard of cases where kids have died because of eating cassava that are bitter. That is cyanide inside cassava. And interestingly, the kind of cassava that has those cyanides are usually very big and look very juicy, only that they have the cyanide. Why? Ask yourself why. It's because cassava itself actually doesn't want to be eaten. It's a defense mechanism for survival. Plants do it. So it is their defense mechanism so that they are not very palatable, so that they are eaten a lot more, because that has an effect in terms of their survival. Now what do we do? The process of producing this bitterness is somewhere. I'm a biochemist. My undergraduate degree was in biochemistry, so I understand this pathway. There is a pathway we call linamarin pathway. It is the pathway that eventually leads to the production of this bitter thing. Now, in genetic engineering, what I do is I go to the genome. It's a cytochrome P450. I just silence that so that it doesn't produce that bitterness. Then we are good to go. It has been done here, and my colleague, Dr. Matthew Pierongugi, actually did that, and we have cassava that has less cyanide, a cyanogenic, that is how we call it. We already have it in the lab here at Kenyatta University. If you look around Striga, where my colleague, Professor Steve Bruno, actually is deep in it, you will find that he has actually realized that striga is, it's a weed, and it is parasitizing maize. What it does, it brings its root and attaches it into the root of maize. Now it waits for the maize to make all the nutrients as it sucks. It doesn't do now the photosynthesis once it has sucked that. And that is why we are saying, how do we stop it? There are mechanisms of how to make sure that it doesn't even germinate, because its germination is also triggered by some chemicals which the maize itself produces when they don't have phosphorus. Those things can be done through the process of genetic engineering. And even as we are talking about genetic engineering, Betty, Now, we moved from the transgenics, which was moving, say, from sisal to maize. We went to what we are calling cisgenic, meaning we just activate the genes themselves of maize itself, or from the same species. Now, we are in what we are calling genome editing. Genome editing, now I won't go anywhere. It is just in your own system. I don't go anywhere. Just get the guide RNA, manipulate what I want to manipulate so that you are able to survive. So, and it is that one you don't even, it's not even genetic modification now, because your genes keep changing. If you look at how the evolution, genes keep changing depending, or keep getting expressed depending on the environment. That is why if you go into a colder environment, you'll find fellow human beings who are wazungus don't wear t-shirts and it is cold. You go there and you wear your t-shirt, you're just like, whoa, you're freezing. Why? And we are both human beings. We have the same genes. It's because their adoption, it's, you know, they have already adopted, and also a bit of expression profiles, which are different depending on how the environment is. And people get to do this. So instead of, we are now learning that there's so much that we have not actually known in the genome of many of these germplasm. And therefore, by genome editing, you can trigger something that was previously just calm in there for purposes of helping. If we trigger, and that's why the lab is there, if we trigger and find that this has actually made it shorter, then we just stop it at that point. So, and we allow technology to happen. The safest way to go to Mombasa from here, Betty, is by walking. And by the way, let me surprise you that when the first car was actually made, there was somebody walking in front of it with a bell actually ringing, telling people that something very dangerous is coming your way. And imagine if he is walking in front of it, then it must be slower than the person walking. But it was there. Look at the kind of perception and the risks. Now we are here with the fastest vehicles, and we still move on. And also another analogy, Betty, you know, the plane is the safest mode of transport, apparently. But when something happens to the plane, the survival rate is almost zero, because there's nowhere to park the plane up there, right? Yet, when we are leaving the airport, and you have traveled repeatedly, have you heard those cabin crews saying that, ladies and gentlemen, probability of us reaching Mombasa is 50%? No. Why? It's because the process of making a plane to the point of it now flying is so stringent that when it goes through that process, please spare us the details of 50% or not. And that is what we are also saying. The process of actually producing GMO, 15 years of just stringency, they are the most regulated products in the world. Once it goes out, please eat it. It is okay.
It is safe.
It is safe.
That is the message here.
Yes.
Well, I don't think it would be prudent to end this conversation without discussing funding of research in Kenya. I mean, you head research at Kenyatta University.
Yes.
Could you just, we know that research is highly underfunded in Kenya.
That's correct.
And you're saying that it's supposed to solve very many issues that we have, not only in agriculture, but, you know, across the board. So could you speak about the funding situation of research in Kenya?
That's one of the reasons why the ban should be lifted. Why? Because donors, a lot of research actually we undertake from good proposals that colleagues write and scholars do write for submission to international donors, Bill and Melinda Gates, World Bank. You talk about most of these USAID. Those are international donors and our development partners probably. Now the challenge is, if the ban is still there, actually those donors are asking us very hard questions right now. That how come that you still are asking for money for research, really, in this area, yet there is a ban? You see, this is hypocrisy. We cannot, and therefore we are seeing, regrettably, the funding for biotech going down, and this is not very good for our country. And also, I must say though that the government tried through NRF. We have received a number of funding from National Research Fund, but it's not enough. The government can do more and can allocate that 2% that was supposed to be allocated to research would do wonders in this country, really. And I don't know why we don't learn. Countries that have made significant progress in their development really also have given research a lot of, budget. Why? Because you can only develop through innovation. So for me, I feel very strongly that the government should increase or just uphold the 2% allocation for research. If they do that and it's allocated adequately in priority areas, we are good to go as a country. Why is it important, Betty, for this ban to be lifted? And this is just pretty quickly. One, it's because this ban is affecting the students that we are graduating from our universities. Remember, we are training them on BSc Biotechnology. Genetic engineering is part of the courses that we train. And now you have been there for 4 years and you go out and you can't practice the thing that you've been actually trained for 4 years in the university. Why? Because there is a ban. So they are asking us very hard questions. And remember, this is a course that has been approved by QUE, Commission for University Education. The Senate has already passed and the QE has also accepted the curriculum. HELB also funds them to come and do these courses, so that is still taxpayers' money. And then once they have done all these things, and they pay a salary also to teach the things that they have banned, and we are not in jail, you can see a lot of hypocrisy and all this. So from where I sit, let's do the one right thing as a government. We've done 50% by allowing commercialization. Let's go ahead and lift it so that we can benefit even in the importation, because the problem with lack of a ban on importation, the feed, animal feed, there is crazy crisis right now out there in the market, because some of the formulation, the kind of the content, the nutritional contents that the item that they're using for this formulation are imported than the GMO. Now soybean is a very critical component in the animal feed. It's 90%, 100% GMO. Now you've stopped that importation. These guys cannot actually benefit from that, and that's why the prices of our animal feed is rising, and this has a direct impact on us. Yes.
You've mentioned the issue of the animal feeds, and we were going to get to that. Animal feeds in Kenya right now are very expensive, and to bring the cost down, farmers are looking at importing GMO animal feeds. The government right now, through the Ministry of Agriculture, is looking at allowing the importation of, is it more than 99% non-GMO? That is to increase the GMO capability, the GMO components of the animal feed importation. Do you think this will sail?
They are even late as a government. Instead of actually still wasting time thinking that we want to do partial, lifting of the ban. By the way, just lift the ban. And once you lift the ban, there are so many things. Because honestly, I ask this question: if you have already allowed, commercialization of BT maize, or BT cotton, BT maize, and cassava is also coming, really? So what is it? Why wouldn't you want, to allow importation, unless the discussion is about controlling the competition from other countries, so that we can develop our own? If that is the thinking, then that's a discussion for another day, and I think it can open up another discussion. If it's for purposes of locking it so that the local farmers can produce theirs, and therefore we build our economy, well, that's a discussion that economists will really find very interesting. But for me, my claim or my plea right now is lift the ban so that the manufacturers who are deep in food, animal feed and food and feed industry can actually get the right raw material that they need to help them develop and manufacture animal feed. It is critical and it is high. What does that do? If animal feed is high, then this means the cost of milk will go up. The cost of other foods that are from animal derivative, animal products will go up. And we all live, unless we feed on chicken are here, eggs. We are talking about pigs are here for our pork and bacon and all these things. And now we cannot import the raw materials that are very critical for the formulation of these products. It is unfortunate. So my plea, and I keep saying this, let the government lift the ban. It will increase the research fund. It will reduce the cost of animal feed. It will make us actually import other food GMO derivatives that are important in agribusiness for producing some formulation. Even our brothers and sisters who are living with HIV, 90% of some of the food formulation that they require for their survival actually are laced with GM products, soybean. And that's the case. Canola, which is, a GMO for oil. Right now, oil prices have gone higher. And we have, GMO, oil from canola. So it's a thing that was good then to protect the country because there was a publication, the fake publication, but it cannot take us as a country 10 years to lift something that your neighboring country, say Sudan, actually approved at that point. Ethiopia is up here approved. So where are we heading? And by the way, Kenya is a central country for the region. Now, when Kenya actually brought in this ban, Tanzanians, you can imagine, they were saying, hey, if wenzetu wa Kenya have put a ban on this, let's watch. The Ugandans were saying, hey, hang on, we are here. But at the end of it all, we are lucky, we are happy that at least now Uganda has already at a good level in terms of biosafety framework. Tanzania also is making progress, baby steps. Mozambique is around there. Burkina Faso is on it. Niger is talking very nicely around the biosafety frameworks. And these are very good things to report about, and the landscape is changing. In 2018, we had only 3 countries. Now in 2022, we have 7. And 4 more are about to come on board. So this is not a bad thing, really, for the continent. And we really would want this to be escalated and probably form part of even the harmonization within the East Africa community. Because one of the things that are actually slowing the adoption a lot more in our neighboring country is because we all, these countries have their unique biosafety laws that are not allowing. So there is need for harmonization of these biosafety laws so that there could be free movement of also goods around the region. Then we are good to go.
Yeah. You've talked quite a lot about how GMO is safe and all that. I'm curious, what is the scientific community and even other stakeholders in this sector? What are you doing to remove this notion in people that GMOs are unsafe? The actual steps that you're taking.
That's a good question, Betty, really. Part of the reason why it took us long to start to break this down is the very nature of a scientist. For a long time, we have been in the lab, and many of us, if they sit on this seat where I'm sitting right now, might find it very difficult to break it down to the layman's, because I'm really struggling now to make sure that the public really understands this, because the language is different in the lab. And scientists, we are taught, and our familiarization is on making sure that we do what we do best quietly and in the lab, in a language that only fellow scientists understand. Now, what we have done is that there is an organization, for instance, that I chair called Kenya University, Kubiko Kenya University Biotechnology Consortium. I'm the chair of that organization. It was formed in 2014 because when we realized that there was a ban and nobody was speaking about it, and we are the scientists in here, what this organization does is to advocate for safe use of biotechnology and also to advocate for it in the scientists themselves, to say, hey, we are here and we know what this thing is, and we want to say that it is safe in ABCD, and please watch ABCD. For instance, even assuming right now, Betty, all of us scientists just say, we are also tired of pushing for something that you guys don't believe in. Let's go and do matatu business or do other things because we can. Then we leave this country just like that. Who will be here to actually even verify when the bad GMO is coming? We still need a lot, and that's why I keep saying this government needs to invest even very heavily in this technology. Even if you don't want it, please invest and invest so that you are able even to protect these so-called risks, to protect your people against this risk, because they are not there. So we need to be here and to be given sufficient funding to make sure that we are still able to protect this very, very country. For your information, we have National Biosafety Authority. The CEO, the previous CEO, the inaugural CEO was a doctor. The second one, Professor Goy, was a professor. Now the current one, Roy Mugira, is a doctor. And everybody, they are experts in this area. So they know what to regulate and they know what not to, approve. So for me, it is important that we talk more as scientists, and I really am grateful that you've given us the opportunity even now to talk about this. Allow a lot more of better messaging, because the anti-technology, the anti-GMOs, they use very scary actually means of scaring people. When somebody touches on your fertility and your potency, you can imagine that they tell you take GMO, you won't give birth. That's a very serious claim, and we don't do that. We are a bit modest. We tell them no, the science says so, and we are almost thinking that we also would want to go bare knuckles now and tell them no, tell us, let's go to the lab, tell us what exactly, why are you saying it brings cancer? And yes, cancer is here, and we are without the GMO. Okay, so we scientists must speak a lot more, and have open discussions with, say, key stakeholders, including even parliamentarians, to make laws that would be very conducive for the implementation and the adoption of this technology. Right. It is a good technology.
It's a good technology.
Yes, it is.
In just 30 seconds, Prof, I'll give you 30 seconds to give us your closing remarks.
My closing remark is that approved genetically modified crops or foods are safe.
Okay.
Don't be worried. As a country, we have all the necessary infrastructure to make sure that we protect this country in terms of regulation, capacity, and even ability to do research on it.
Right.
And may we as a country lift the ban.
May we as a country lift the ban. Well, that is the message here from Professor Richard Owor, the Research Director at Kenyatta University, and we have been talking about GMOs, where we are at as a country in terms of lifting the ban, and also what it could do for the country's economy and food security. This is BizCheck. We take a quick break. When we come back, a conversation on business process outsourcing. Do stay with Channel 1. We are good.
The World Blood Donor Day is celebrated every year on the 14th of June. This year's theme is donating blood as a sign of solidarity. This event will be held at Olkalau in Nyandarua County and will be presided over by Mutai Kagwe, the CS of Health. There's someone who needs blood every 2 seconds. You are encouraged to regularly and voluntarily donate blood in order to address the current shortage. Help save lives by donating blood.
There's still time. Take this girl back to Green Hill before our father returns.
When father returns, I'll talk to him and break off the engagement.
And you're now in love with another woman from Green Hill? Throw her down the void hole.
Yes. Mercy, my king, my king.
You're just up right now.
That's not ordinary lightning. It's lightning that's intended to be used in trials. To not withstand it would mean death.
It seems being the prince isn't a blessing, but a misfortune.
You think you are so smart, Odette? Well, you are not going to get away with this.
Actually, I just came here to leave my things.
Oh, well, that's not a problem. I'll cancel the reservation so I can go with you.
No, I can't take you with me. I'm sorry.
Mr. and Mrs. Paulina Morat and Camilo Fonseca. He's officially their child, and his name is now Mauricio Fonseca Morat.
He's mine, and I've gone through a lot just for him. So you are not going to spoil any of my plans. So I want you to stay away from him.
Deceive me! You fooled me! Hey, it was because you wanted to be with my brother!
After 18 months of intense construction, Africa's grandest expressway, the Nairobi Expressway, is finally open to the public, albeit on a pilot basis. This road is fast becoming a model of public-private partnership here in Africa. But what do we know yet about this expressway since it was opened to the public on the 14th of May 2022?
If Thika Road was version 2.0, then this is version 2.1. So we have gone to a higher level of delivering roads. And that's really will be the legacy that we should remember President Kenyatta, that she showed us that it is possible to do more by encompassing the capacity, the will, and the resources of broader team of stakeholders.
This week on Inside Government, we are talking about the Nairobi Expressway, and we are talking to the chairman of Kenya National Highways Authority, Engineer Wangai Ndirango. Watch the program right here on KBC Channel 1.
Hello and thank you for staying with Channel 1. You are watching BizCheck and this is the second hour of the program. My name is Betty Kiptum. Now we want to take you to Mombasa, where the Kenya Association of Hotel Keepers and Caterers Symposium is ongoing at the Sarova White Sands Hotel. Let's listen in to just what is going on at that function.
Up country, it's between 40 and 50. There are some issues there because the government is paying the civil servants per diem, and what they are doing is they come to the hotels like 5-star hotels, and because they have been given their per diem, they will have the conference in the 5-star hotels and then go and sleep with the hotels where they can afford to pay 1,500, and therefore the country hotels are suffering a lot. And you know we have to refurbish our facilities. Refurbishing facilities, we need money. Money has to come from the conference. But if they are going to sleep elsewhere where they are not entitled to have the stars like we have, then it becomes very difficult. Of course, like any other business, we are back again to market and seriously marketing the local market, because as you know, the Kenyans, if they can become the consumers of our services, let's say 60% or 70%, then the 30% can be from the foreigners, and therefore we think marketing locally, that's the only way we can survive, because we don't know what else is coming. Could be Corona. Corona came the other day and it changed everything. Not only the hotel industries, even you people. Everybody now thinks differently. For us to survive, of course, in areas of finance and other things like that, I think everybody is now keeping something aside for the bad days. But we hope we will never repeat this one of Corona. Yeah.
Chairman, I'm sorry to ask this question. I'm sorry to ask this question.
Yeah.
Do you have a shed light about Ronangala issue, Ronangala Utali? Do you have any idea?
Ronald Gala?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Some light.
That probably
the minister not even here.
The minister, the representative of the Ministry of Labour is here. He probably will touch something to that effect. But for me now, I don't have anything about Ronald Gala.
I'll comment on
Sorry. Yeah, later.
Most hotels were struggling with the burden of the workers, and they had to slash because of the corona. Right now, have you recovered, and even the salary slashes that the management have issued, have we seen a scenario where...
Well, that is the Kenya Association of Hotel Keepers and Caterers Symposium that is going on there. Players in that industry are just addressing the press and talking about a number of challenges that the sector, the hospitality sector, is facing, including the need to build a local market that is resilient and will support the tourism industry because of the uncertainties that come with the impacts of certain shocks, including COVID-19, that largely impacted the global market of tourism. Well, Junei Karisa is on that bit, and she shall be filing a report for us on what happens during that symposium a little bit later. But now in studio, we want to have a conversation on business process outsourcing. And to have this conversation is Vinay Subramaya. Did I say that right? Yes, he is the BPO director at Technobrain. Welcome on set.
Thank you. Thank you.
Karibu sana. So let's just start with this. What is business process outsourcing?
Right.
Yes.
So, business process outsourcing typically, or people with a misunderstanding, thinks that it's all about contact centers or the call centers. So basically, business process outsourcing is not just limited to call center. Call center is one part of the complete gamut of business process outsourcing. So anything which is a non-core activity for any organization or an institution, which can be performed by an outsourcing partner who can supplement in terms of the cost of operation to compensate in terms of any challenges that is associated with handling it in-house, is what business process outsourcing is all about.
And what are these kind of things that can be outsourced under BPO?
Right. See,
well, of course, apart from the call centers that you've mentioned.
Right.
Yeah.
See, all these things started when call center took as a boom. But even prior to that, even in a manufacturing industry where some of the ancillary components are being produced by a third-party vendor, it is still an outsourcing. When you design a component, it's still an outsourcing. When you do a bit of market research by a third-party vendor, it's still an outsourcing. So you have the need of a particular service, but you're not doing some of the activities associated with that service. You're engaging a third-party vendor, that's still an outsourcing. So when you talk of an outsourcing as to what it is, it can start from a prospect acquisition in a sales cycle and trying to onboard a customer and handling any technical queries or any support related queries to any of the services, doing market research, doing business process re-engineering, handling any collections, or even doing a bit of market research, handling the procurement cycle, the accounts payable, receivables, procurement, sourcing of vendor. The list goes on.
Yeah, you can literally outsource anything.
Exactly.
All right. So how is this industry performing in the country right now?
I wouldn't say badly, but there is a lot of good things that is happening for Kenya to take advantage of it. And as much it is, there is a promise being given out to the global market that Kenya is a good destination for any of these players who is looking for an outsourcing requirement to come and engage with players in this country, because some of the basic things that are needed is a good infrastructure, a stable economy, the resources who can actually diligently deliver those services which a buyer is looking for.
Let's talk about BPO in IT. I believe that's where you largely major in. BPO in IT, apart from the call centers, what else can you outsource in IT?
See, one of the most important things that's happening is now everyone is talking of artificial intelligence, machine learning, developing newer applications, getting into automation, because everyone wants to see how they can be doing certain things smartly than in terms of putting a lot of effort. So to do that, you need a lot of development work to be done. You need a lot of automation, back-end data to be fed into. So this is an area which is taking a lot of prominence of late. And that's where even Kenya as country, we are doing very well.
We're doing very well. So do we have the labor, the skilled labor that is required?
We wouldn't say that the skilled labor is readily available, but you have the basic ingredients to make the labor or the workforce ready for this. So because of the prominence given to the education, prominence given to the graduation here, and many pursuing business IT or agricultural IT or having an interface with an IT skill is giving a lot of momentum for them to be taken into that domain and trained further to make sure they are employable ready for such requirements.
Let's delve further into the labor issue, the human resource part of it. How well paid are the professionals in this industry in Kenya compared to the global, market?
See, one of the key important things for attracting the buyers to a new geography will be the cost of operation.
Yes.
When you talk about outsourcing, for that matter, some sort of outsourcing started happening onshore, because when you look into the buyer market for these things, it is majorly an American player or an European player from European continent. So for them to outsource, they started looking at markets which can deliver these work or develop these work at a cost-effective manner, but yet with very good quality. So that's how India took a lead, and then Philippines took a lead in terms of doing such work. And thereafterwards, there has been countries in the near shore like Mexico, Guatemala, and some other countries which are closely associated in terms of culture as well as the living lifestyle associated with America, took a lead as well. So even in that spectrum, Africa was not that much considered, apart from bits and pieces of work being done in South Africa, later some part of Egypt taking that lead. Right now, Kenya and in fact countries like Ghana, Rwanda, they're also coming into the play in terms of how we can cope up with these requirements and serviceability.
So Kenya is now coming into the market strongly.
Definitely. In terms of going back to the question of how competitive or how compensative it is, see, obviously, like I mentioned, the price competitiveness is the key advantage for a buyer to look into a new geography. So in that way, Kenya is not that pricey in comparison to the initial worlds of outsourcing who took up, like whether it is in India or Philippines, which are now heading towards a market of knowledge process outsourcing, and the cost of operation or cost of delivery is at a higher end in comparison to what we are trying to catch up with. Because again, it also goes with a lot of investment being put to make sure that the quality of service and also the attrition, the retaining of the talent who come to start working in such projects are being held, so that it doesn't become a false economy for a buyer to come to a newer destination.
When you say that, that looks like an advantage for the buyers, so to say. But for the professionals in the industry, it doesn't sound like an advantage for them, because they are doing, give or take, even better work, but at a lower cost. And don't you think that the Kenyan industry risks losing this talent to, better paying markets like Europe or even the US?
I wouldn't say so, because when you look into the buyer market, there is not much of a buyer market for these skills at the moment, locally, domestically. So, I mean, there has been instances where I have met with a lot of individuals who have done business IT or business agricultural IT, and they're doing some odd jobs like driving or doing some sort of support roles, right? So despite having an ambition to pursue an IT degree or a professional course or a diploma, when you're lacking the chance and the opportunity to work in the stream which you have aspired to learn, was something which was lacking. But with the advent of these players coming into the market and trying to look for the resources here which can deliver those requirements of these organizations, there is an opportunity which is getting created for those talents. So somebody who would have a degree but not an applicational ability to implement whatever the person has learned was very much there. So now with these companies coming in here, you're actually getting an opportunity to execute the skills that you have learned in the college or in the school, and then try to make a living out of it. So obviously it will give that paradigm shift. I mean, even when you look into some of the economies which is dependent on the outsourcing, like Philippines or India, see, this paradigm shift happened 2-3 decades ago, when probably a son started earning more than what a father could earn in his 30 years of service, because of the advent of international buyers coming into that market looking for more skilled labor in terms of developing these applications, testing these applications, and things of that sort. So I wouldn't say that it's actually cannibalizing in terms of the talents getting lesser paid, but I would say definitely they're getting a decent line of earning, as well as a better exposure to the worldly requirements in terms of those applications.
And how high is the demand for these services?
With the global pandemic, what happened, especially the US market started providing a lot of freebies to their citizens, which made, it's a witness what we have seen. When we participated in some events in the US, it was even very hard to find Uber drivers coming in, because they were being given with some perks for survival, and nobody really wanted to work. Whereas on the other side, from where we represented, from Kenya, we were looking for opportunities where these people can outsource their requirements so that we can deliver them. So when you look into that kind of disparity, there is a lot of demand that is there. It's only that we need to market it, we need to package it in a much better structure, talking about all the other advantages of the geography that which can offer, so that we can attract more buyers to come and engage with the talents what we have in this country.
Just the other day, I think it was yesterday, the government launched the Konza City Call Center, and it's going to be the biggest in Kenya and I think the region. What have you experienced in terms of government support for the industry?
Definitely there is the prominence for the industry. Some of the things like right from laying the under fiber cables, undersea fiber cables, submarine cables, wherein we can even go and talk to a potential buyer telling that we can have a point-to-point connectivity between Kenya to some of their servers in Europe or in America, because there is infrastructure which is available, and the prominence that is given even with the Vision 2030 to have the presidential digital program and things of that sort, it has really made those building blocks ready. So unless you have the confidence that whatever the sales pitch you are making to attract a prospective customer, but you are not sure that whether I can deliver it or not, you cannot go with that confidence. So when you have such building blocks ready, whether it is connectivity, whether it is the national data security policy, whether it is in terms of the stability in the economy, the kind of perks that is being provided for export of services, so these are all the things which really makes it worthwhile ingredients to package that model and talk to a prospective buyer that this country is ready. We have the resource, not just the human resource, but also the resource that is needed for delivering those requirements.
When you talk about the business environment to support the industry and even the policy environment, there's, I don't know, I'm sure you've you've gone through the ICT bill, and the industry is a bit, divided on what to say about this bill. What are your views on that bill that requires that IT professionals have to be licensed annually? There's the issue of the training requirements for IT professionals. There's a lot in that bill, but what is your view on it?
At times, I would say these are all some of the things that are needed in terms of convincing for an international market, because when somebody who is an international buyer, like even you have seen in the news that Microsoft came into this country, Google came into this country. These are some of the things which are now known, but there are a lot of artificial intelligence companies who are working either through a crowdsourcing kind of a model, because they have identified that the country has got what it requires in terms of giving them that reassurance that I can work even with people sitting at home, because you have the basic requirements of what I mentioned, the data security aspects of it, or whether the talent, whether the methodology where they can vet whether this individual is really credible or is telling what the certificate is talking about. So these are all some of the things which are really making it ease for convincing the international community, because even a smallest of the mistake in some of the industries can go for a lawsuit of millions together. So for such industries to come and work in a country which is not that exposed or not that much in the mainstream from historically is a really great achievement towards which we are heading to. That's what I can really say about. So when you talk about these bills, yes, there can be further refinement to such bills, but you need a point where you will start something so that there is a convincing point, or there is a gradual curve which can go and talk to these prospective customers, telling that, if you want to come and operate in a country, because when we talk about 123,000 graduates coming out of the country every year from various different universities here, you need to create a demand aspect of it as well. You are preparing a lot of supply. So when you want to create a demand, you need to have buyers who can employ them. Otherwise, like I said, there will be a lot of the parallel employment which will create, whether it is through drivers. People would have a degree and they will look for buying a car and putting into the Uber.
Okay.
So that's not what we intend to do, right?
All right. Yeah, this conversation will continue in a little bit. We want to go to the Ambassadors Conference that is closing today. The Interior Cabinet Secretary Fred Matiang'i is speaking currently. Let's listen into that.
The voter bribery, the cases of abuse of social media, which we are dealing with, because we have sufficient institutional frameworks in place to deal with these issues. And as I've said before, I have told them here that as our representatives, when they go out there, Kenya has built up a very strong image as a democratic governance environment. We are not going to claw back on those credentials by, for example, raiding freedoms, shutting down the internet, interfering with freedom of association or freedom of assembly or whatever the case may be. We are going to live by the Constitution. We have all taken the oath of office to ensure that we live by the Constitution. All we are doing is encouraging our fellow citizens, our brothers and sisters who are political players, to be mindful of the country, to be mindful of the citizens of this country, to keep the peace, to campaign very peacefully and respect, the rule of law. That's all. And on our part, as a national security agent, we are doing everything we can to provide the support that our colleagues need as they move around in their campaigns, in their motivation of voters, and in their contact with Kenyan voters as we prepare for election day. Finally, because these ladies and gentlemen are the ones who speak for our country, especially in the region, I've asked them to tell all our friends, our neighbors and our friends in the region and further afield that we do not anticipate any problem. We want to continue our trade and our economic activities because we do not anticipate any disruption of any kind, just by dint of having a general election around the corner. So it is as simple as that, and I'm happy about this interaction. And my colleague, the Cabinet Secretary for Foreign Affairs, will substantively soon, talk and communicate our general position on this. Government operates in an organic manner. Everyone plays their part, but we are coordinated in an organized way because government is an institution. So our bit in terms of our preparations and what we are doing will be in when our Minister of Foreign Affairs now addresses the world on all these kinds of things. That's basically all that we have spent our time on this morning. Thank you very much, good people.
Yes, perhaps,
no question, because there was nothing to ask a question about.
Is Fred Matiang'i, the CS Interior, there speaking at the close of the Ambassadors Conference that has been going on, of course saying that there are a number of issues that they're looking into, but he has said that people who are campaigning, politicians who are campaigning at this period towards the August 9th general elections should do it in a safe manner, ensure that they are preaching peace and that there is safety wherever they are. Well, the details of what unfolded in that Ambassadors Conference will be coming to you in our subsequent bulletins. In studio, we are having a conversation about business process outsourcing, specifically in the IT sector. And we are talking with Vinay Subaramaya, the BPO director at TechnoBrain. And we have talked about quite a lot. Please do interact with us on Twitter. We are at KBC Channel 1. My Twitter handle is at Betty Kiptum. And tell us what you think. Have you handled BPO before? Does your company outsource? What challenges do you face? And we shall be talking about them in the middle of this program. Well, Vinay, let's pick it up from there. What are the challenges that you face even in this sector as the BPO director?
Right. Definitely is, when I say it is outsourcing and has a lot of dependency on human resource, retaining the talents is one of the biggest challenge. First of all, in some space like what we are venturing into in terms of IT testing or IT development, finding employable resources with the right skills is also one of the challenges. You know, no matter how much you can try to have a newer model or an out-of-box kind of a thinking to try and get the right resources, whether you go and do a campus recruitment, whether you do a bit of boot hiring or making sure that you run a hackathon and things like that. Still, when you want certain resources, certain skill sets, which we think that because of the kind of educational background they might be having, that they might be ready for such skills, it still becomes a bit challenging when trying to get the requirement from a buyer and trying to match with whatever the skills is required. So that's a space where we are working hard to make sure that we build in the right employable curriculum, so that it's like job-oriented courses. No matter how much of education and the skills that you have gained through universities, there are certain things which requires a bit of polishing and making sure that you align with the requirements, how you can deliver to those requirements. So these are the two major challenges that as an outsourcing professional we face, finding the right talent and retaining the right talent. Because, you know, once they get to that maturity, or that, okay, now I can manage it by myself, they keep looking for hopping around and then looking for other opportunities or trying to become freelancers. So when you are getting an international player, probably a Fortune 50 company or a Fortune 500 company, it takes a lot of hardship to convince them. First of all, to come out of their comfort, which can be America or Europe for this matter, and come to an offshore location and an African location and Kenya. I mean, when you drill down the probabilities and the aspects, you have taken a lot of hardship to get them to where you want the services to be delivered from. But when you have these challenges, which you don't foresee when you are trying to look for such opportunities, because when there is no opportunity, you have a lot of people coming in and dropping their CVs and would be willing to work. But when they start getting to that momentum and they feel that, okay, now it becomes difficult for an organization to hold these talents. That too, when competitors are coming into the market, the global competitors, the direct companies are entering to the market, obviously the challenge of talent retention becomes a big challenge.
Let's talk about the issue of finding the employable skills that you've mentioned. You've said there are some programs that they have to go through after university. I mean, isn't there an opening for the curriculum in the university to match the services or the skill set that is required when they come out here? And what is the industry doing to ensure that what is being taught in school, I mean, there are universities that have everything with IT, you know, you're taking Bachelor of including whatever it is with IT, that when they come out, those skills are actually what the market requires. Is the industry doing anything?
Yes, I mean, you know, this is where you need to look at the book of lesson learned. When you talk about how the industry has grown in some of the mature markets, what to talk about, be it India, Bangladesh, Philippines, all these countries, I think that's where a lot needs to be borrowed from to make sure it's not just the responsibility or an attractive proposition for providers like us, but it can also be a good proposition for the universities to think about. Because, you know, let me tell, when I was pursuing my undergraduation, companies like Infosys and TCS, they used to come and set up training centers within the colleges and train the candidates who are in the final year of their undergraduation to the skills what they feel would be needed for them to recruit these candidates after their graduation. So, and again, then it became so much aligned with the universities that they started adopting these things as an autonomous learning for their students. So that phase of adoption to what is required, yes, you might be making somebody learn a C programming or a Java programming, but how much of it can be used for a real-time development need that might come to work in your country is what needs to be ascertained and adopted in the curriculum, whether it is through the organizations like us who are looking for talents or through universities who are having that responsibility of preparing employable talents out there.
Of course, even after the university education, you know, this sector keeps evolving quite a lot. So there is constant need to upskill and, you know, learn new skills and grow. Is this happening in the sector, and are the professionals that are there intentionally looking for new knowledge?
Definitely, I would say, because, you know, with the advent of e-learning, I think that's where even the pandemic came as a blessing, because, you know, universities were closed down, the formal learning or the offline learning took a toss during the pandemic. So even parents who would avoid their kids getting onto digital tablets and other things, there was no way out. I mean, you had to let them learn through an iPad or a tablet. So this was not just the thing which happened for the informal learners, but also for the professionals who had certain skills, who saw a need of remote working requirement coming into place so much, started looking at various alternate options for them to upskill. It also gave an opportunity for a lot of e-learning platforms to come up with curriculum which can make them more employable. And think about having a lot of other skills. That's where even the automation thing came into such a boom, that when you are trying hard to convince an organization to adopt for automation, the smallest of the organizations started looking for it, whether it is in terms of the bot adoption in handling their day-to-day activities or customer interactions. There came a lot of trend towards that, which made people unlearn whatever they had learned and learn new things. So that way, I think a remarkable effort has been put from the individuals as well as organizations to make sure that they correct themselves, because everyone was talking about digital adoption, but it really happened during pandemic. So that way, I think it's happening very much.
The beauty about these industries is that you don't really have to go to school for you to learn the skills. I mean, there are programs out there that you can just, you know, self-learn and teach yourself if you're dedicated enough. With Kenya's high unemployment rate, do you think this is one of the industries that can strongly play a role in solving the problem?
Definitely. I would put my 200% behind that. Because, you know, like I said, it's not just the talent availability, it's also the infrastructural availability, which is making it more attractive proposition. the cultural bridge which is there to meet the requirements of an European or an American perspective. So these are all some of the basic ingredients which is already there. So it's now about how vocal we can be in terms of marketing this, and how the industry can come together. I mean, see, when you look into, again, I go back to reference of some of the markets which has really taken advantage of this requirement. So there is NASDAQ in India, which is a marquee body which brings in all the professionals together. There is BPESA in South Africa. There are similar bodies in Philippines, Egypt, and other countries who come together, who bring all the players of the industry and go as one force to the buyer's market to talk about the advantages of the country, the kind of skill set. One organization can get benefited or one cannot get benefited because based on their competitiveness. So, but having such marquee institution plays a key role in terms of attracting, because they, if there is a challenge, like one of the questions you asked about the ICT bill, how promoting it is, or how much of pros and cons it has for the sector. So when you have such collective minds from the industry working towards a common goal, it brings in a lot of value proposition. That's one area is where I feel as Kenya we need to come together and have a combined force or a combined voice to go and get the international attention, so that even the buyers will get that I'm not dealing with an individual organization, but I'm dealing with a consortium of the organization or an organizational marquee body which is helping in terms of underlying any challenges that the buyer might face or might highlight, which can be addressed in a collective manner.
So definitely this could be the answer to the unemployment issue we have.
100%.
Right. Our viewer, let's take you now to the Day of the African Child celebrations that are going on. Let's listen in to what is happening. Remember, these celebrations are going on across the country and across the continent to ensure that the African child is living a better life. Let's listen in.
Tunafundisha. Na ni kwa sababu gani? Kwa sababu watoto already walikuwa wamefundishwa life skills, walikuwa wanajua haki zao, jinsi wanaoweza kujizuia, na tena tukafundisha walimu tunawaita teacher mentors, wale walikuwa wanaenda pamoja na wasichana hata wakati walikuwa na COVID na shule zilikuwa zimefungwa, bado tulipata nafasi ya kufikia hawa watoto kupitia teacher mentors. Na kwa hivyo hiyo ni jambo moja ningetaka niseme hapa tukiwa kwa Suswa. Na naamini kila mmoja atafanya mahali yake. Sisi tuko na mahali yetu, lakini hata walimu wako na mahali yao, wazazi tumeona wako na mahali yao. Na kila mmoja akishika nafasi yake, hakika tutaona tutakuwa na matumaini. We shall see the fruit, na tushaanza kuona. Kwa hivyo hatuwezi kufa moyo, na hatutaki kufanya mambo yetu kwa nguvu. Tukiingia mahali kama hapa Suswa, tunataka tujadiliane na walimu, tujadiliane na wazazi, ndio tuelewe, na kwa pamoja tujue tunaweza kusaidia watoto wetu namna gani. Kwa hivyo nilitaka niseme tunashukuru sana. Last year tulikuja na KBC na tukawa na wakati mzuri hapa Suswa. Tunataka bado kuendelea, na niseme asante sana hata kwa mwalimu mkuu. Tulikuwa tumekosa mahali ya kwenda kucelebrate the Day of the African Child, lakini wakati tu mwalimu mkuu aliambiwa tunataka kuja.
That is the Day of the African Child celebrations going on there in Narok. Of course, all the celebrations, we shall be giving you details of how they went down much later. We want to take you now to Mombasa, where 1,500 engineers are congregating for a 3-day symposium. Speaking right now is Engineer Erastus Mongera. He is the Engineering Board of Kenya Chair. Junei Karisa is on that bit.
Good morning, Betty. We are coming to you from the White Sands Hotel, where for 3 days, 1,500 engineers are expected to deliberate on emerging issues that pertain their profession. And right now, I'm joined by the Engineer Board of Kenya Chairperson, Engineer Erastus Mongera. Karibu. Just yesterday, we were talking about some of the issues, and of course, the PS was here. He addressed some of those challenges. Today, we are talking about the opportunities that exist in this particular profession, not only here in Kenya, but across the world. What are some of the opportunities that these engineers can look forward to?
Thank you very much. As you are aware, we have the African Union Agenda 2063. In that agenda, there are some barriers that are recommended to be opened up. Part of that is training services. This is services of engineers in consultancy, in supplies, in design, and in many other areas. This morning we are discussing how to prepare ourselves to open, because this is competition. Professional engineers will come here to compete for the services we offer. Professional engineers from here will go to other jurisdictions and compete for services there. And we are discussing and seeing that we shall not be disadvantaged, but we shall be advantaged, or we shall have a fair playing game. Part of the recommendations is to have mutual recognition agreements, so that when a professional engineer is registered in this country, he can work within our own East Africa region, in the African continent, and even globally. This again ties with what we were discussing yesterday, acceding to the Washington Accord, so that when we are acceding to that accord, engineers in Kenya can go anywhere in the world without any barriers.
Probably the government should be on the front lines to see that they're doing mergers, or they're doing some talks with some of the countries to ensure that this is realized. Maybe there are strides that the board has engaged with the government to ensure that this is taking place.
Yeah, this process of training services is coordinated by the Ministry of Industrialization through the State Department of Trade. They have been pursuing this agenda for quite some time, and we have been involved. And it is a requirement that is bound to happen. I think we have been saying, as a continent, if we don't come together and do business together and live as a common community, then we shall continue being exploited. We shall continue having professionals coming from Europe, coming from Asia, coming from Latin America to do work here, while we are not able to go there. So this is a government effort, and our role as a board is to facilitate the professionals, the engineers, to be aware of this and to give their input and see how we can then partner together and come up with a very good framework that will benefit all of us.
Finally, the PS yesterday talked about the need for engineers or some firms to merge, so that they can have a likelihood of securing some of the tenders, not only in Kenya but even abroad, so that you have an enabled workforce. How is this going, and how will the board ensure that the trainings of the managerials are taking place and you're able to get more opportunities in this profession?
We are encouraging our professional consulting firms through the Association of Consulting Engineers in Kenya, to come together and train together. If you are, the important thing here is a capacity. How financially stable is one company there to bid for work? And again, what is expertise? If you are doing a mega road project, for example, you need pavement designers, you need bridge designers, you need water and drainage system designers, and so on. So there is no individual or a company that can do this singly. So we are encouraging to merge and form good consortiums, so that when we bid for projects, then we are sure that they are getting it.
Engineer, do you, as we wind up, do you agree with some of the sentiments when it comes to joint ventures and mergers?
Yes, so much. Representing the engineering fraternity in this country, we are looking at these trading services as a very critical aspect for us, because now the world is going to be opened up. We are going to synergize, and the engineers in this country and African as a whole and even the world are able now to offer their services across the world. And when we synergize, we get that economies of scale, and we are able to drive the economic agenda within the country, in the region, and of course globally. And of course we shall be able to improve the quality of life of our people and develop the African agenda.
What is the one thing that may make you stagnate or may hinder this whole procedure when it comes to your profession as a boardman?
I think the main thing that we have seen over the few years in this country is a capacity of our local contractors and our local consulting firms in terms of what they are able to achieve. The threshold has been always very high, and I think that has always been the crying call from our engineers in this country. If that can be looked at, then we should be able to move forward as a country.
Thank you so much. We are here at White Sands. Tomorrow is the final day that these engineers will be wrapping up their symposiums, where they are seeking to partner and find solutions to the emerging issues that face their profession. Back to you, Betty Kiptum, as we continue with the symposium today.
Our very own Janae Karisa there at the Engineers Symposium, where 1,500 engineers are congregating to discuss matters affecting the engineering sector. She spoke to Engineer Erastus Mongera, the Engineering Board of Kenya chair, and they have discussed quite a number of issues. And remember that quite a number of construction projects are taken up by international companies as opposed to local companies, and that is something that is of course being discussed. And there were issues about unlicensed engineers that came up, that they are causing the collapse of buildings and maybe construction projects, and those need to be weeded out. Of course, that symposium is a 3-day conference happening since yesterday. Today and tomorrow will be the last day. Janae Karisa will be keeping tabs on that bit. In studio here, we are having a conversation about matters business process outsourcing with Vinay Subbaramaya. He is the BPO director at Technobrain. Thank you for staying with us, Vinay. Let's talk about, you mentioned that the industry does not, or has, many people are not aware of what they are doing. Is there anything the industry is doing to market itself and package itself?
I would say yes. I mean, there are bodies like ICX and some of the limited ones in the market who are talking about adoption of this. And there are also some of the UN projects like Netherlands Trust Fund, which came in and tried helping the sector to come together and even build a website to start doing a bit of e-commerce on that. So there are efforts being put, but in very little bits and pieces around that.
Little bits and pieces. And what more should be done?
Definitely, like I said, mentioned earlier, a marquee body, setting up of a marquee body, or even when we look into a neighboring country like Uganda, the National Institute, the NITA, National Information Technology Authority, is taking that lead to bring in all the players from the sector, so that they can go as one visible force, try to promote and market the sector. Some of the things like that which we can even borrow from some of the neighboring countries, whether it is Rwanda Development Board, which is taking that kind of an initiative from the country. So some of these initiatives are also needed in Kenya, wherein prominent players are taken into that fold and start pushing towards, as a country, to attract more businesses or more buyers to come and engage with the sector here.
You've talked a lot about the outsourcing by international companies. How about outsourcing by now the local companies in Kenya, outsourcing these services to BPOs?
It's a great question. When you look into the domestic market trying to outsource, definitely the objective of outsourcing needs to be clearly ascertained. Because some organizations would want to go for an outsourcing to cut the cost. not definitely to improve on the productivity or the serviceability.
Okay.
So that way, I'll go back to one of your questions where you said that isn't this letting to a lesser earning potential for an individual? Because, when you are talking of an outsourcing, when you are talking of trying to get more employment, you also need to see how we can improve the lifestyle or take somebody from a different level of Maslow's hierarchy of needs to a higher level. So when you are trying to get to that domestic market fight, which mostly is because of the cost of operation. When you try to do it, you obviously go competitive in terms of pricing. So when an organization wants to go competitive in terms of pricing, you have to cut certain corners. You have to cut in terms of the salaries, or you have to cut in terms of some of the benefits. So which really doesn't help in growing the sector or giving the right platform or an encouragement for an individual to take up this line of service or career. But it can work when tier 2 centers can come up. Like, what happens now, even in Kenya, the outsourcing is predominantly limited to Nairobi. So which means somebody who is studying in upcountry or somebody studying in coastal and having an aspiration to work in an outsourcing industry or planning to become a developer or a tester, they have to migrate to Nairobi, wherein you have the lifestyle which is a bit expensive, the cost of living is higher, the centers where these operations will happen are quite far from the places where they can live. So you need to have a balance. So instead of having a migration of talents to the major cities, if the organizations can think of doing a reverse migration, where you are taking the employment opportunity to a place where you say that, okay, there might be 400, 500 graduates coming out of an university from that place. Can we set up an incubation center out there and start working for a domestic requirement? That really makes sense.
Okay.
Because you are actually justifying the objective of an organization, which might be to reduce the cost of operation, but also creating decent employment.
So as we come to a close of this conversation, what are the things that you want to see happen in this industry moving forward?
I would definitely talk about marketing the potential, because when you have that potential, right forum to market that in the right arena, where the potential buyers are there, that needs to definitely happen. And in terms of certain aspects of principles that needs to come in the players in the sector to make sure that we don't try to poach talents just because we have got an opportunity and poach unethically, without even letting those talents serve the rightful notice period, so that you can actually plan for somebody else to be groomed up to take up their roles is one of the challenges. So certain sanity around that has to come in. So these are the two major critical aspects. One, to make sure that we attract buyers. Two, to make sure we have the talent retention or talent exit principles followed very thoroughly.
Those are the things you'd like to see changing in the near future. Well, thank you very much for speaking with us, Vinay.
Thank you. Thanks for this opportunity.
I have been speaking with Vinay Subramaya, the BPO director at Technobrain. We have talked about business process outsourcing, just what it is and what is happening in the industry. Most of the companies that are taking up these services are international, and the local market needs to do something, including improving their budgets for outsourced services. Well, this has been BizCheck. You have been watching for the past 2 hours. Thank you very much for your valued company. From the team that made this possible, we wish you a great afternoon. My name is Betty Kiptum. Have a lovely day. Bye-bye.
Bantu ba Minto Buyamore, stesheni unayoipenda ya Minto FM inakualika ujumuike nasi katika bonge la roadshow itakayofanyika kwenye kaunti ya Nyamira siku ya Alhamisi tarehe 16 Juni. Msafara wa Minto FM utapitia Kijauri, Nyansiongo, Manga, Keroka, Gesima, Mosoveti, Konate, Langenyo, Nyamira na Miruka. Nayo tarehe 17 tutatembelea maeneo ya Ikonge, Ekerenyu, Magwangwa, Magombo, Tombe, Kemera, Omogonchoro, Getare, Jogo na kumalizia mjini Kisii. Kutakuwa na vichekesho, burudani na zawadi kemkem za kushindaniwa. Pia utakutana na kikosi kizima cha watangazaji unaowaenzi.
Minto FM yenye karuga y'ubuhusi.
There's still time. Take this girl back to Green Hill before our father returns.
When father returns, I'll talk to him and break off the engagement.